who is provoking protests in Russia and around the world? How does the message about bad Russians spread, and why does the US Democratic Party need it? Why was the American government so badly embarrassed by a group of enthusiasts from St. Petersburg? And why did former special prosecutor Robert Mueller want to keep secret when backing off the investigation into interference in the American election, international law, freedom of speech, and the right of self-expression? These people didn't care about such restrictions. They only need power. On September 10, 2019, the State Duma launched a special commission to investigate the facts of foreign interference in Russian internal affairs. The members of Russian parliament were required to provide a detailed analysis of the facts when the Western governments tried to influence the political process of our country. We are determined to check all the facts, all the arguments, all the information, and make a decision within our competence. On September 16, 2019, the Commission concluded foreign interference in the internal affairs of Russia took place. There were different forms of interference, from traditional massive ballot box stuffing and promotion of disinformation in social network to round-the-clock hacker attacks on the Central Election Commission of Russia. Mass protests in the summer of 2019 in Moscow. A lot of fake reports of violations, calls for extremism in social networks. Western intelligence agencies and politicians were involved in all of these actions. The goal of all this is not elections, but the goal is precisely to undermine the situation, to form a so-called protest leadership, to eliminate the Russian state in general. For this purpose, an extensive network of agents and resources has been created and developed for a long time, working in one mission to solve political chaos in Russia. For example, Sergei Kochetkov, editor-in-chief of the Russia Today channel, spoke about Camp project, which according to him is organized by the Prague Civil Society Center and funded by the US money. The employees of the RT visited such camps in Tbilisi and Yerevan and claimed that they taught representatives of NGOs and journalists how to work in social networks. According to Mr. Kochetkov, the final goal of these actions is to organize riots. The commission also named the alleged curator, a CIA agent Stephen Michael Sexton, who at that time headed the regional security bureau in the American embassy in Russia. Stephen Sexton is designed as the head of security according to the embassy's website. As for the street riots organized by these people, I will say that this technology of color revolutions was developed in the last millennium and is still actively used. Our opposition figures have learned everything they do from these manuals. But it's not correct to say that the interference in Russia's internal affairs occurred only in 2019. This interference does not stop since the moment of the Russian Federation's foundation. For almost 30 years, the US has been interfering in Russian elections, and they don't even hide it. There is an example of the most significant elections, of which have already been publicly stated that they were paid for from the United States of America. It is the presidential elections of 1996. American politicians directly admitted that they gave money, supported and played on the side of the one of the candidates. All the time, the intervention didn't even stop, only increase. And any attempt to call the United States to account were met with the phrase, "Well, this is for the sake of democracy." That's the whole explanation. In order to facilitate the process, the US State Department created dozens of media sources and bloggers who promoted the anti-Russian agenda directly in Russia. At the moment, the opposition in Russian can be divided into several independent blocs. The first is the Open Russia of the convicted oligarch Mikhail Khodorkovsky, a structure with many different divisions across the country. The second is the Anti-Corruption Foundation of blogger Alexei Navalny. It's an organized structure that has branches in every major city. In fact, they are both built on the same principle. Both of these blocs are supported by a pool of the same opposition media, which can be called the third bloc. Finally, the fourth bloc includes opposition figures from parties represented in the State Duma, as well as individual members of the government. What do they all have in common? Financing. Many people already know that Khodorkovsky and Navalny receive money from foreign funds for their organizations. The criminal oligarch is sponsored by the American lobbyist company Orion Strategies, LLC, in the US Senate, owned by George Soros, an American billionaire who always openly opposes Russia. Navalny is officially supported and sponsored by the National Endowment for Democracy, an American organization founded in 1983 by the US Congress. It is funded from the budget of the US Agency for International Development. But there is interesting thing. Russian opposition media are also fed from the American funds. Novaya Gazeta receives annual grants from the State Department-controlled Center for Research of Corruption and Organized Crime, owned by the billionaire Soros. The Dosh TV channel receives money from the US Agency for Global Media, controlled by the US government. It was previously called the Board of Governors for the Broadcasting Companies. The only exception is RBC, which is supported by English BBC channel. They also get assistance from foreign, supposedly independent media. Foreign media and even diplomatic missions do not disdain to use their official websites and their social media pages to publish various appeals, instructions on both voting and behavior for people. By the way, the Duma Commission to investigate the facts of foreign interference in Russian internal affairs once again recorded attempt to interfere in the elections held on September 13 this year. The Commission has already sent information to the Prosecutor General's office and the Ministry of Justice about the illegal actions of Russian NGOs, foreign agents during the last election campaign. But who benefits from constant attempts to interfere in Russian domestic politics? All the time, the main enemy of Russia has been the US Democratic Party. It was its members who developed many different operations against the Russian Federation. It was they who constantly fueled scandals. It's true, Russia is a convenient enemy for American politicians and for the most part of the Democratic Party. There is no such enemy, but it must be created in order to distract and confuse voters. The four factors that determine the hatred of the American establishment towards Russia were described, for example, by the Zero Age portal in the article "Why the Elite Hates Russia." According to their version, the essence is not at all about xenophobia, although it does exist. There are several key factors that make Russia a unique force in the world compared to peers, analysts say. First of all, Russia is an independent country. Russia can't be directed with an external remote control, as it's done with most countries. And the American elite clearly doesn't like such independence of the Russians. For example, Russians expelled from its country the Open Society of the American billionaire George Soros, which, according to Moscow, poses a threat to the state security of Russia. Second, Russia cannot be easily harmed through clandestine means used by the CIA, Britain MI6 and direct military conflict. The United States conducted a number of strategic experiments in which a conditional confrontation with Russia on the European front was considered. The probable outcome of the collusions led the experimenters of the Pentagon to a set conclusion. The results will not be encouraging. Third, Russian culture is too complex for the American elite to understand. The elite may think that they are well versed in foreign policy, but the elite is not even able to spell the word reload correctly, as happened in its time with Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, when a word appeared on the bottom, which in meaning is almost the opposite. Finally, the US elite clearly realizes it is unable to control our today's Russia, the way they do it, for example, with Germany or even with China, which in reality, according to the portal analysts, is completely dependent on the US and on the American currency. For Republicans, who are generally focused on the US domestic politics, the situation does not bother at all. For Democrats, Russia is a threat. It is in their party that the most important Russophobes are hiding, who since the collapse of the USSR have concentratedly tried to bend our country under themselves, at the same time gaining votes from their voters on the Russian threat, but that all changed in 2016. The first reports of Russian interference in the US electoral process appeared at the height of the presidential campaign in July 2016, after the hacking of the correspondence of the leadership of the US Democratic Party, which was published on the WikiLeaks website. Then it turned out that during primaries, the National Committee of the party supported the ex-secretary of the state, Hillary Clinton, acting to the detriment of Bernie Sanders. Clinton then claimed that Russian hackers were involved in the hacking of the mail, and that she had reliable information about Moscow's intention to influence the course of the presidential elections. According to the WikiLeaks statement, the documents were obtained from a Democratic Party insider. But the Russia card did not save Hillary and the Democratic Party from losing to Republicans, although the Democrats really liked the concept itself. And from that time on, a new round of anti-Russian accusations began. Now, real democracy was threatened not by the Russian military, but by Russian hackers and trolls. On January 6, 2017, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence releases a report with a high degree of certainty that the hackers attacked on computer system of the United States were intended to undermine public confidence in the US democratic process and discredit Clinton to increase Trump's chances. There is no direct evidence in favor of this version in the report. The refusal to publish them was explained by the need to protect the sources of the information. On June 5, 2017, The Intercept releases excerpts from a National Security Agency report claiming that the GRU had carried out a cyber attack on the software provider used to vote in the United States. The portal did not provide information confirming the involvement of Russian intelligence in the hacker attacks. At the same time, immediately after Trump's election in November 2016, an investigation was launched into Russian attributed interference in the election. It is run by Department of Justice intelligence agencies and both houses of Congress. In addition, in May 2017, the US Department of Justice appointed a special attorney. It was the ex-FBI director Robert Mueller. And on October 30, 2017, on the eve of hearings in the US Senate Legal Affairs Committee, Facebook, Twitter, and Google published information about the dissemination of Russian-related political advertising accounts, with the aim of shaking public opinion in the United States before and after the presidential elections. According to them, about 80,000 posts were posted on Facebook alone 2015-17, which could be seen by 126 million Americans. The witch hunt has begun. The Democrats appointed Russian bloggers as witches. They found incomprehensible accounts and began to present them as interference in the elections. Moreover, the US laws do not even have such case. Therefore, Robert Mueller had to dodge in front of the press and the Senate to invent something. Particularly interesting is the fact that American media tycoons and owners of social networks have been most heated up on the topic of interference. Starting in 2018, it has become customary for them to find Russian accounts every 6 months, usually just before the next round of anti-Russian hysteria. Most often the name of the St. Petersburg businessman Yevgeny Prigozhin, his company Concord Management and Consulting, as well as the internet research agency allegedly belonging to him, sounded in the case. For 2.5 years of work of the Special Investigation Group of Robert Mueller, his charges prepared and transferred to courts of various instances, more than 3 dozen personal cases. This led to the fact that initial investigation, which Mueller positioned as a process of Russian interference in the US presidential elections in 2016, disintegrated into several loosely related processes. At the same time, the Russian trace in individual trials against American politicians, lawyers, political strategists and officials was not just untraceable, it was completely absent there. Such a frank mess in the conduct of the investigation is connected with several points. On the one hand, the task set to find Russians behind Trump was extremely vague and politicized. Mueller was looking for any contact between the presidential entourage with people with Russian surnames or Russian origin. The case turned out to be a curiosity, not one even conditionally Russian, set in the dock. But the US citizens talked too much about each other that 7 of them ended up in prison bunks. At the end of April 2019, Robert Mueller, having found no solid evidence of Russian interference in the American elections, shamefully curtailed his investigation. Apparently, the special prosecutor realized that his entire investigation turned out to be senseless burning of taxpayers' money and left the battlefield ahead of schedule. And on March 17, 2020, Mueller's fabricated case against the Russian company Concord unexpectedly collapsed in an American court. The US Department of Justice dropped the charges against the Russian company Concord Management and Consulting due to fears that during the trial it will gain access to sensitive information about the sources and methods of investigation. After such a failure, the remaining members of Mueller's team lost their positions in the US Department of Justice. But what did Mueller find in the stated 4 million documents of the evidence base, because of which a seasoned American prosecutor publicly capitulated in court? This is the first time these documents from Mueller's evidence base are published, and it is not surprising why Ministry of Justice did not want to publish them for the general public and did not even show them to the defense in the Concord lawsuit against the United States. It turns out that the materials of the Russian intervention case, there is a huge array of data that is campaigning in favor of the Democratic Party in general and Hillary Clinton in particular. And the publicity of these materials will put an end to the theory that the Russians supported only Trump and therefore would deprive any accusations against them of any justification. Such communities as Black Matters US, United Muslims of America, LGBT United, Black TVs, and many others have promoted an agenda of Trump's opponents, the Democratic agenda. Therefore, the Democratic Party and the intelligence officers acting in its interests prefer to admit the complete absence of collusion between Trump and the Russians than to publish the entire array of investigation documents. It turns out that over 150 million Americans saw social media posts praising both Trump and Hillary, and their creators did not even hide the fact that everything is conducted from Russia. Can you see this in Mueller investigation? No, all these accusations are based solely on the fact that Russian bloggers supported only one candidate, thereby breaking the balance and influencing voters. The most striking confirmation of the unwillingness of the investigators to make the case materials public is the Robert Mueller's report published under pressure of the Republican Party. As you can see in the example below, most of it is blacked out due to the concerns that the release of this data could harm the investigation. It is strange that the presence of such evidence did not surprise those who collected them. Or these people deliberately tried to plant misinformation hoping that no one would disassemble 4 million documents, and who then framed Special Attorney Robert Mueller so hard. The leadership of social networks, which contributed to the promotion of the anti-Trump agenda and were the first, as we have already indicated above, to provide clear evidence, could not fail to know that not everything is so smooth in the collected array of documents, and the groups supporting Hillary Clinton were managed not from the United States. Particularly noteworthy is the show flogging that the US lawmakers gave Mark Zuckerberg in Congress, the sole purpose of which was to deflect any suspicions from the head of Facebook. According to The Guardian, the event itself was organized in such a way that despite its all pretentiousness, it was doomed to end in nothing. Moreover, we managed to get access to letters from the management of social networks Facebook and Twitter, in which they not only thanked the community administrators who promoted the agenda favorable to the Democratic Party, but also advised them on what is better to emphasize in their activities. The first letter, dated September 3, 2016, explicitly states that the entire management of Facebook Corporation and Mr. Mark Zuckerberg personally appreciate the help in promoting the ideas of democracy, combating racism and racial discrimination of the Black Matters US community, the same community that was created according to Robert Mueller by employees of the Internet Research Agency. Your community unites divided American liberals under one flag. In a short time, you have assisted in promoting the US Democratic Party and spreading liberalism in the US. It is especially important for us because of dangerous and unpredictable rival we are facing, Donald Trump. Facebook will keep cooperating with you for the democracy and for Hillary Clinton's victory. Facebook will keep cooperating with you for the democracy and for Hillary Clinton's victory. We appreciate your political and financial contribution by buying the political advertisement, and we will make sure that Black Matters political content will be promoted more actively. We also expect promotion of Black Lives Matter organization from your side. This organization is an instrument in achieving the Democratic Party's goals, and the main goal is Hillary Clinton's victory in the upcoming elections. The letter is signed by Facebook's CEO Sheryl Sandberg, and it served as proof of the Russian investigation, which found the same corporation's Facebook. In other words, the social network openly thanks and promises support to the Internet Research Agency, against which it is fighting. Recall that it was the possible support of Trump by agency employers that became the basis for Mueller's accusations. On the other hand, it becomes clear what the special prosecutor was so afraid of what he even agreed to resign. It turns out that the paid in rubles and clearly from Russian advertising posts praising Clinton, Facebook is very actively supported. Russian Facebook-sponsored Black Lives Matter movement, those supporters are now smashing up American streets and wreaking havoc across the United States, was also originally created by the Russians. Those promotions was overseen by Facebook at the request of the Democratic Party, and the social network's support for this movement has not gone away. This is why Mr. Executive Director asked to support the movement in her letter, and the social network promotes the post of its members in violating of any rules. And here is the similar expression of gratitude from Marn Levin, CEO of Instagram. Dear Russian partners, Instagram board of directors would like to express our sincere gratitude and appreciation to Blacktivist page admin for the supporting of anti-racist protests. Your understanding contribution will help Democratic Party nominee Hillary Clinton to beat her rivals at the upcoming 2016 US presidential election and smash Donald Trump. We highly recommend you to increase the number of publications against GOP nominee Donald Trump. We guarantee outstanding reach and engagement of this content among Instagram users. These materials confirm the direct cooperation of representatives of social networks with foreign citizens and employees of the Internet Research Agency, who promoted the agenda favorable to the Democratic Party. And once again, they praised both Trump and Hillary equally, and the democratic movement was promoted directly under the protection of Facebook. In addition, both emails clearly indicate that social networks are ready to promote and distribute content against one of the candidates as much as possible. And no one is confused that the accounts are not maintained from the United States, and they are generally paid in rubles or hryvnias. There is a policy of double standards. Leading the community for Trump is interference, and for Clinton is the freedom of speech. And it turns out that you can't praise anyone in the internet or social network. After all, if you praise the wrong person, the whole country will accuse you of interfering, for usual praise. We also have a number of accounting documents at our disposal, which indicate how the work was carried out in social networks, for example, from the territory of Ukraine. This is confirmed by the phone numbers to which the accounts in social networks were registered. They are highlighted in red. So why this information never appeared in the press or was not announced in the Mueller's report? After all, the whole situation falls on the very thesis on which he based his accusations. Our source, who asked to remain anonymous, claimed that the whole situation is telling who supports the Democratic Party and how much money they have for this. I've been US government Russia advisor for some time, and there is what I want to say. US Democratic Party is a bunch of liberals under corporate control. They don't want to help Americans. They want to get as much power as possible. Facebook, Google, Amazon, Soros, they are in control of them party. And they are the ones benefiting from all the Russian interference chaos. They are killing two birds with one stone, using sanctions to get rid of competitors and strengthen the Democratic Party by destroying Trump and Republicans via mass media. Don't you believe it? Here is ex-Facebook database specialist Sophie Jung's testimony. In just 6,600 words, she provided exact examples of how Facebook used its platform to manipulate public opinion of political parties and heads of states in other countries. Using Facebook, various political figures ran and coordinated their political campaigns to silence or draw attention to certain events and figures in India, Ukraine, Spain, Brazil, Bolivia, Ecuador. Here's a couple of the quotes from her message. It took 9 months for the head of Facebook to activate a coordinated campaign against a group that used thousands of fake accounts to massively boost Honduras President Juan Orlando Hernandez's ratings to mislead the people of Honduras. 2 weeks after Facebook's crackdown, they returned, and it caused a tug-of-war between me and the ops behind the fake accounts that are still active. Jung figured out that ruling political party in Azerbaijan used thousands of not verified or blatantly fake accounts to massively harass the opposition. Facebook started investigation into this a year after Jung report. You see, Zuckerberg's social network turns a blind eye to bots and trolls when it's profitable for it. After all, Azerbaijan receives US support, as does Honduras. So are Black Lives Matter activists who rob stores but are promoted by the Democratic Party, and Russian trolls who write posts about how good Clinton is. The social network knew about all these cases, but was silent. Here is another example of social media doing things they later try to tie to Medin. Here you can compare what news Google shows you for Trump and Biden requests during the election campaign. Acting president news are purely negative, and there is not a single negative word about his opponent. And we are not speaking about each separate media with its own opinion. We are speaking about access to the information provided by Google. In other words, your browser, or to be exact, Google Corporation, decided what you will be reading, what political position you will be watching, and your whole agenda for each day. All this is a gross violation of US Constitution, First Amendment, that guarantees freedom of speech to the US citizens. Democratic Party continue to ruin so-called freedom of speech accurately. They do not hesitate to use all methods, even those ones they proclaim out of law. It is forbidden to give Donald Trump any praise. It is forbidden to pit Black Lives Matter. It is forbidden to scold liberals with their ideas. And if you still do not get the idea, social network moderators and newsmen will explain it to you in simple words. Indeed, the media corporations are sponsors of all the political chaos we have witnessed worldwide by now, including Russia and US. Would be Facebook, Google, or Democrats blamed? A definite answer is no. Meantime, new interference in 2020 election is alleged by social networks and intelligence services. This meddling effort is predictably labeled Russian, but performed by their own politicians.